just get folks invited here. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome, Erlina. Welcome, Dr. Egerton. Welcome to everybody joining us already. This is great. Okay. Can you hear? Are we good?
We're good.
We can hear you.
Beautiful. Okay, I love this. People joining. We'll give everybody a second to kind of get in the room and get comfortable. How are y'all doing today?
It's great.
Doing pretty good. Yeah. We're really happy to be here with each other.
Definitely.
Yes. As he's saying hello, Andrew, hello. Hi, everyone.
Yes. I see my daughter join too, so that's wonderful.
Perfect.
Hi, Erlina's daughter. I'm your Aunt Deborah.
Friendly face.
Yeah, she's at work, so she might not be able to stay for the whole thing, but she really helped me along with Sarah to kind of get ready for today, so it's just really wonderful.
Hey,
Jason. Oh my
Jason.
God. Jason's in the house. All right. Thank you.
I saw Suzanne is there. Hi,
Yes.
Suzanne.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I think I will just kick us off briefly, do an introduction of our two guests today for anybody who may not know them, and then I'm going to actually back away, and Erlina and Dr. Egerton are going to have a really rich conversation, and just a happy International Women's Day to everybody out there. This just so happened to fall on, I think, a very appropriate day for this conversation. So for those of you who aren't familiar, my name is Sarah Dewey. I'm not the social media manager anymore. I'm the creative director of the Narrative Enneagram. First introduction of that title, and my pronouns are she, her. So I'll start with introducing Erlina. So Erlina Edwards is the Narrative Enneagram's executive director and a member of our associate faculty. And in addition to Erlina's background in corporate leadership and current work with the Enneagram, she's an interfaith minister and accredited spiritual director who lives in Tucson, Arizona. So, and she will be in conversation with Dr. Deborah Egerton, who is an internationally respected psychotherapist, an International Enneagram Association accredited professional with distinction, best-selling author of the book that we'll discuss today, and an inclusion, diversity, equity, and anti-racism consultant. So we are here today to discuss Dr. E's new book, No Justice, No Peace, a transformative journey of social justice, anti-racism, and healing through the power of the Enneagram. So, like I said, I will back off, let them have a lovely conversation, and we would love to hear from you throughout. So if you have comments, please comment throughout. If you have questions that you would like to be answered or addressed directly, there's a little question mark button in a speech bubble at the bottom of your screen. That's a great place to ask questions so they don't get lost in the comment thread. And after kind of the bulk of the conversation, I'll jump back on and help moderate that Q&A. So I think that's the logistics. Also, if you stick around, or if you can't, come back later to get the details on how to participate in the giveaway to win a free copy of the book that we will mail straight to you. So that's it for me for now. Erlina and Dr. E, take it away.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So, well, first of all, Dr. Egerton, you can imagine how much joy I feel in this moment to be present with you. I've done remarkable work with you. You've been very generous in teaching me and bringing me into this moment. So I thought, for starters, what I'd like to do is to just read a short paragraph so that I can introduce people to a portion of your book that I think will kind of help set up our conversation. And so it's an excerpt from chapter 2 called The Inflection Point. And I just think that it was so relevant for today's discussion. It'll just take about a minute or so for me to read it, if that's okay with you.
That's fine.
Great. So we know racism is the foundation we stand on to justify othering in all its ugly forms. sexism, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, ableism, classism, religious discrimination, face-to-face adversity that has infected us in every corner of our culture, and we need a plan, a guide that leads us through these challenging times. Something more than a wish and a flurry of temporary activism. We need a miracle. The kind of miracle that emerges from faith, from trust, and from truth. The mere recognition that there is more that unites us than divides us is the first step toward bridging our divide. When we take time to try to understand each other, it's easy to discover we are not so different after all. We may occupy different perches on the hierarchical social structure where an individual perspective shows our different views of the same dilemmas. However, the societal structure of systemic racism and the flourishing of others has set us up to fail. We were socialized into a system of beliefs that perpetuated and supported racism and othering. We were taught and conditioned to believe that white-bodied humans hold more value than people of color. Many people were taught that heterosexual people are normal and that anyone who does not fit into that category is abnormal. Some of us were also given messages that people with disabilities were less than and consequently show them less respect. Even in the realm of class and social standing, we harbor messages of value based on where a person resides in the social hierarchy.
Well, I have to tell you that just hearing you read that touches my heart. It came from my heart, and to hear it reflected back was just a lovely experience for me. And I feel like my angels must be here because the hairs on my arms are standing up.
Yeah. You know, one thing that came to mind, can you tell us a little bit about the book? You know, why did you write it, and who did you write it for?
You know, I have been in the business of noticing and trying to course correct people who are marginalized, trying to course correct that situation or circumstance in the world for as long as I can remember. It started in my childhood. I began to notice how some people were treated differently from others, and it bothered me. You know, fast forward to, I am an Enneagram. I stand at 0.1 on the Enneagram. It's not surprising to know that this would be something that would be disturbing to me. And as my career evolved, I always ended up back in a space where I was working with marginalized communities. Mm-hmm. And it troubled me that there didn't seem to be any sort of unified effort around trying to identify, find solutions, and to eradicate this sort of thing from the human condition. It was just normalized that some people were going to get treated better and others were not. And I ended up in a career that took the turn of being this inclusion, what I call idea work, inclusion, diversity, equity, and anti-racism work, which was not where I started. You know, I started as a psychotherapist, but I could see what was happening to young students of color. I could see what was happening to students who came to our country, and they were international students, and they were going through sort of the culture shock of trying to adjust. and the students with any type of disability. And so there just wasn't anything out there that was helping me to address this in sort of a holistic way. And when I found the Enneagram, I discovered, oh, wait a minute, there is something out here that really will help with all of this. And I started studying the Enneagram, and then I began to incorporate that into my therapy with my clients, and then into my work with my business, Trinity Transition Consultants, and using it to help people find and discover this common ground, the similarities, and then to be able to bond around the similarities, and then be more curious about the differences, and to move to a space of being able to at least respect the differences and to understand that. So I wrote the book for everyone. I wrote the book for people who have been and continue to be marginalized, who I call love warriors, because I don't like the word minorities. I think that that's really bad language to have in your head around yourself as a human being. People of color are not minorities. If you look at the, the real population of the earth, we're not minorities. And so it's very important to not take on a moniker that doesn't really describe who you are. But the language of love warrior speaks to the reality of being in a group of people that really has to fight for human rights, for basic human rights. And you have to fight for it every day, but there's only one way that we can fight it, and that's with love. So love warriors, wherever they may happen to be, whatever category that love warriors fall into, it is people who are minimalized and marginalized. So that's who I wrote it for. Being a Black woman, of course, a lot of the focus is on racism, because that is that gnarly, ugly root that has allowed all of the forms of othering to thrive. And for people who enjoy reading, I always bring up the book Cast, because anyone who reads that book is going to understand how deep and gnarly the root of racism and what slavery did to encourage and foster and support all of the racism that we're still dealing with today. So the book is really about my journey through discovering all the different things that I have seen happen kind of over my lifetime and in my career, but mainly focusing on the Enneagram types and how they show up in the different forms of either actively othering people, passively othering people, or the ones who have actually taken the long journey and arrived as allies and advocates. And my focus is very much on that middle terminology, passive othering, because that is where most people tend to get stuck. The active othering, you see it, but the passive othering, that's the thing we talk about in the Enneagram community, about the people who are asleep. And so I want them to wake up.
And, I think unique to what you're saying, and I want to just unpack this a little bit. I'm just going to maybe move away from a question that I had put together, but based on your conversation, is you're one of the first people who, and there are a few books out now from people of color, from BIPOC people, about the Enneagram. There had to have been a moment when you knew the Enneagram and this particular topic had to kind of come together. What was the reflection point that took you to a space that said, these two have to be joined?
There are actually two things that did that for me. One was an inflection point that was painful, and that was being at an Enneagram conference, and we were in Minneapolis, and Valandro Castile had been murdered just stone's throw away from where we were at the conference center. And I came to that conference really thinking that people would be talking about the fact that we were there and this had just happened, but no one mentioned it. And I looked around and I recognized that by and large, the Enneagram community was white and white-bodied. And I was in a deep, deep state of grief about having seen this, because he was murdered with his girlfriend and his little girl in the car. And it was just very painful to watch. And I was triggered by it. I was grief struck by it. And when it wasn't mentioned at the conference, when we didn't have a moment of silence or anything, I stood up and I asked at that conference, I said, what are we going to do about the lack of diversity in the Enneagram community? I am really concerned about this. Look around. And I keep coming back, but I seem to be one of very few people of color that shows up at this event. And there really wasn't a good response. There was acknowledgement that that was true, but no one seemed to have any real answer to the question. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, I recognized I can't look around for other people to do this. If I'm the one that's noticing, then I need to be the one that is willing to pick up the banner and start working toward putting more diversity and spreading the Enneagram out into communities that are marginalized around the world. This really needs to be a cry for unity.
Why do you feel that's important? What? Because we have a universal audience right now, and as a BIPOC person, along with you, I'm really advocating that we really bring this work to our communities. Please share, why is it important that all people have access, but particularly right now, marginalized people who've not had access to this? Talk to them.
Okay. This is important for a number of reasons, but the first reason is because people need to heal. If you are a love warrior, if you are marginalized wherever you are on the globe, and whatever community you reside in, whether you are a person of color, a person who is other than heterosexual, whether you are non-binary, whether you are in a religion or have a spirituality base that is other than Christian, all of the ways that we find to separate and divide, the people who have been sort of sliced out have been wounded by this. Mm-hmm. And in order to thrive and survive, the first thing we have to do is heal. And the Enneagram can help us to heal because it really shows us how to do inner work. People talk all the time about do the work. And the question that comes back is, what is the work? Right. Well, the work is beautifully laid out with the Enneagram because it's like a blueprint to your soul. Mm-hmm. And the deeper that you go into doing that work, the pain, you touch the pain, but it's like you're beginning to put a soothing balm on the wounds that have been there over time that you didn't recognize or acknowledge or do anything to try to heal them. For so long, and I will speak from the perspective of being a Black woman, for so long, I would watch horrible things happen, and yet I would have to show up the next day at work and do what I do with no acknowledgement of what had just happened to a member of my community, of what had just happened to my own husband or one of my sons. And those things were living in my body and living in a way that was causing anxiety, that was causing illness. I used to suffer from migraine headaches, just different ways that the woundedness, the trauma is trapped in our bodies. So for our communities to heal, and for marginalized communities, people who are actually trapped in this cycle of being othered, there's a healing that has to take place first. Secondly, I want to get this one point in.
Okay, good.
Those
Please.
who other us are also wounding themselves. So when I talk about healing, there's a healing that has to happen on the side of the person who is the recipient of the othering. But the people who are the perpetuators of the othering are also wounding themselves, because you cannot go through your life harming humans who are connected to you, because we're all connected, without the realization at some point that you are also harming yourself. And one of the things that is beginning to bubble up just within some of the questions that are coming back from the book, and it's coming back in white communities, are having to answer to their children and their grandchildren about all the things that they're seeing now. And the children and the grandchildren are asking their parents and their grandparents, what was your position in all of this? What did you do when the civil rights movement was going on? Did you know about Emmett Till? You know, we have young people now learning about things that we lived through, but now the questions are going back to their parents and grandparents. The white-bodied children are saying, what was your position in all of this? And if it was never spoken about in their homes, they're curious as to why. So I think that that's pretty fascinating that, you know, we're cycling around where everyone is beginning to question what was going on and why was there not a response to some of these painful atrocities that we are so aware of now.
You know, when I read the book, I realized that you intentionally wrote the book for everyone. So anyone in the Enneagram community, of course, who's kind of well-versed in the Enneagram, saw the universality of how you wrote the book. I'm curious, since the Enneagram community has been largely a white-bodied community, and fortunately we're starting to see big change happen, largely due to teachers like you and other people who are realizing just how profound this deep work can do to help you to become a better mother, a better, in your relationships. It's all over the board. I think my daughter who's on this call will even testify to the differences in my relationship with my children after I got deeply involved in the Enneagram. I would say my spouse would be included in that as well. What has been the response from the Enneagram community, largely the white body community, about your boldness in bringing this work forward?
Well, it's been interesting. Privately, people are popping up all over the place and thanking me for the book, actually sending me little notes. You know, they'll either show up on Facebook or Instagram, or someone will direct message me. And what I find that's interesting about that is that people are very comfortable telling me how they feel privately. Publicly, they're not going online and reviewing the book. So I think that there's still a little bit of hesitation around letting other people know that they're on board with the realities as they're laid out in the book. And that's not an unusual response. It's hard sometimes to recognize that you've been a part of something unintentionally that has created pain and suffering and division for anyone that it has created it for. And, there is a place that lives and resides within all of us of pure goodness. And from that place, there is remorse, and there are apologies. There are people who are coming forward and saying, thank you so much. I've never looked at it this way before, but I still question, why will you only say that in private? The bold strokes that have to be taken where people are willing to speak to it publicly and to write a review and put their name beside it. That's when we know that people are no longer fearful to say, I'm on board with this. I get it. I understand the Enneagram, and I understand that, you know what, I've been in this passive othering space, and that's not where I want to be.
Yeah.
So I'm looking to see, if the longer the book is out there, the more that people read it, if people will come forward. Now, I will tell you this, and this is very sad, the people who have horrible things to say are not afraid of going public. They are not at all afraid of going public. There have been people who have, in fact, we disabled the part where people can go in and just write whatever they want to write on my website. But people were kind of coming for me. The Enneagram has nothing to do with racism or any of these other things you're talking about. There is, comments like, there is no such thing as racism. Why are you perpetuating this lie?
So what is your response to that? What is your response to an audience that comes back and says that the Enneagram really has nothing to do with this particular topic? How do you respond to that?
It really depends on where I am and who I'm speaking to. Because there are times when it is relevant and it is going to actually do some good to educate someone as to what the realities are. But part of what I teach is that, you don't go back at someone who is dug in and they're actively othering, and they have a belief system that is of such that they are not going to be convinced, and particularly not in front of a large group of people. They're just going to dig in harder. And so my response, particularly when I'm in a public venue, is, this is why we have free speech and free will. You're entitled to your opinion. However, I hope that you'll take the opportunity to allow yourself to open your mind to the possibility that there might be another way to view this. And then I'll continue on with whatever I'm teaching. People sometimes will get a little frustrated because they want to see me just hammer them into the ground. They want to see me go after them. And it's not my style, because what I know is that anything that is already negative and toxic, if I add anything that is negative and toxic to that, it doesn't make it better. The thing that wipes people out and really has them sort of turn around and look at themselves is when you can give a loving response. When you can give a response that doesn't agree with what they're saying, but also it is steeped in kindness. I understand that you have a particular perspective and viewpoint, and you're entitled to that. However, and that goes a long way with actually helping someone to turn the corner. And I've done this for most of my career with, as you well know, Erlina, I used to go into large organizations and stand up in front of 100 white men and have to do training on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as soon as I walked in the door, it was like, oh my God, what are we here for? And by the time we were finished, most of us were cool with each other. But
Yeah.
it's all in the approach.
And it's interesting right now, since so much of that is under threat, right? This whole movement to be able to eliminate all of that. Let me just change subjects just a bit and talk about the fact that the Narrative Enneagram had an opportunity to work with you for a good year. And I had an opportunity to be in 2 classes with you simultaneously. I also see that the IEA is being very conscious also in actually kind of doing this work. So I want to call that out. What do you see is important now for the major institutions involved in the Enneagram? What's important for us to maybe align and maybe do something collectively to move this work forward a bit more aggressively or assertively, depending upon how you...
The first thing is to do the internal work of educating the individuals in the organizations that will eventually put the work out in the world. It's the old notion of clean up your own house first.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot advocate for something that you don't understand. And you have to be willing to get into the messiness of it, to make the mistakes, to have the discussions that you need to have internally about things that you're doing well and things that you're not doing so well. So it's really kind of breaking it down and becoming transparent and very authentic and real with each other internally. Once you can do that, you can begin to build programs that will reach all people. So what does that look like? It looks like auditing curriculums, making sure that you have your diversity, mission, vision, value statements, and that they're visible so that people know that this is part of the organization, the mainstream of the organization. And as I always say, make sure that people know that this is part of who you are. It's not a side dish.
Mm-hmm.
So very often diversity efforts are kind of special projects that are put over to the side, and people don't invest in them because it's not part of the core value of the organization. For any organization, whether it's the IEA, the Narrative, the Enneagram Institute, any of our schools that are out there, diversity, equity, and inclusion need to be core values.
Yeah.
Because we're teaching people globally, not just here in the United States, but people all around the world. And the IEA is a global organization, so everyone's head turns and looks to us, in this nation to see what are we doing. So first step, clean up inside, make sure that people who are working in the organizations get it and are on board, and that it is a core value of each of the organizations that will bring the work out into the larger world.
I think we certainly within the Narrative Enneagram have been deeply moved by your work. I think, our 2023 strategic initiatives are well defined, and coupled with that is a body of work specifically to enhance and expand our relationship with the community. we did a listening circle, and what we heard was, look, don't be performative. We want to see the genuine activity that you're involved with to help us understand this work and to provide access to it. So, it's definitely part of what we're doing. So what do you see as the best path for the Enneagram within the BIPOC community?
The best path for us, and of course, as you well know, no one person can speak for a whole community, but from my perspective, the best path forward is for us, those of us who have access to and have benefited from the wisdom of the Enneagram. We really need to become more proactive in putting it out into our own communities. And wherever there are schools, organizations that are all about the Enneagram, knocking on that door, being willing to knock on that door. And that goes in both directions. So as people of color, or as someone who may be identify as LGBTQ plus, or women in general. I mean, we just need to be bold and to step forward and say, you know what, we want to have a conversation. Right. Here are some needs that are being identified that are not being met. Also, with respect just to the BIPOC community, we have to recognize that there are some beliefs that we have to kind of break through around the Enneagram. There's still some fear that it may be demonic. There's fear of the Enneagram symbol. There are churches that, don't really understand or allow any extra information to get in there about the Enneagram because there's no real knowledge of what it really is or what it can do. So wherever we can educate in our own little circles and spheres of influence, we need to do that. And we need to be willing to ally with white-bodied people to do some of this work together. Yeah. That's our way forward. And Erlina, I do want to say this. Sometimes people feel like because of colonization and cultural appropriation and all of the things that we have suffered through as a community, that we just need to go our own way. And BIPOC communities need to figure out what they want and do what they need to do. And white-bodied communities need to just go away and get themselves educated and maybe come back when they can come correct. There's a problem with that. And I'm going to say that a very dear friend of mine, Norm Mineta, who died a few months ago, and he was the Secretary of Commerce under President Clinton, Secretary of Transportation under Bush. And people were very angry with him. He was a Democrat, and he stayed on board during the Bush administration. And people were angry with him. They said, "How dare you do that?" And he was one of my mentors in the whole realm of diversity, equity, and inclusion because he was in the Japanese internment camps as a child. And Norm said to me, he said, I know people are frustrated with me. He said, but if there's no voice in the room that represents the other perspective, then how do you move forward? And so while I feel strongly that it is important for white-bodied people to educate themselves and for all of us to go through the process of doing our healing work, I think a lot of the work that needs to be done to move forward needs to be done together. Yeah. And so that we can unpack and interpret and really help to move things forward in a way that connects us rather than further divides us.
You know, we're going to close in a minute. I just want to give a shout out to all of our brothers and sisters within the Enneagram community who have kind of come in and is working hard to debunk some of the messaging that has actually been put out about the Enneagram system. And one other thing I'd say is, people say that, you know, that this is white-bodied work, but let me assure you from a historical standpoint of view, when you do your history, you know, the work around the virtues and other forms of understanding the knowledge of self actually came out from Africa, it came from Asia, it came from Egypt, it came from those places as an internal tool before it became a psychological tool, which was actually done by a Spaniard and then came to America. So let's be clear on that as we continue to do our work. So Dr. Egerton, I'd like to kind of give you kind of the closing statements before we move to Q&A. And I also would just like to personally thank everyone for, you know, for your interest in this deep and relevant topic right now and your devotion to bringing healing to the world. So Dr. Egerton, I'll turn it back to you.
Well, I want to thank you for that last statement that you made about where sort of the wisdom of the Enneagram came to be. That's
Egypt,
a whole,
right?
I just came back from Egypt. I'm wearing Sekhmet on my neck. You know, I got to go in and just to see, you know, Egypt is in Africa, you know, and just to see the wisdom and to see actually a place where the desert fathers and mothers were said to have, you know, sort of hidden and studied, and to see sort of the opening that is shaped like the Enneagram. And just to the virtues, to see how within our process of doing our inner work with the Enneagram, how, you know, the 9 virtues show up. They're written in the hieroglyphics on the walls. I mean, it's mind-blowing. But I don't want to take, you know, I want to get people excited about that, but that would be another whole Instagram session. My closing statement to all of you that are watching and that will watch is that Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you do better. And we, as people who study the Enneagram, we have learned how to know better. We've learned how to do inner work. If we don't know that we are all connected and we're studying the Enneagram, then something's wrong. Mm-hmm. Something's a little bit off there, because there is no place where I end and you begin. In reality, Amen. We all have to look at the fact that we are here for a purpose. And part of that purpose, I believe, is to love one another in a way where you would never do to another person something that you would not do to yourself. Mm-hmm. So we need to get that, and we need to really, really let that sink in. And don't hide if you're an ally. Mm-hmm. Come out and stand in the light and say, you know what? Not on my watch. Not on my watch. I've seen enough of this, and I now get it that I have a role to play. I don't want anyone else saying to me, oh gosh, Deborah, Dr. Egerton, that's so lovely. Good luck with that. No, don't wish me good luck with that. Get involved in your own way, because in the book, I do represent how each type has a gift that they can bring to help unify us and to move us forward. So read the book, review the book publicly, let people know, you know what? I don't know as much as I might like to know, but I'm on the road. I'm on the path. And I, for one thing, I'll tell you right now, I say all the time, I believe there are more people who want to do good in this world than it's possible to even find. But I'm looking for you.
It's such a blessing to know you and to be involved with you in this work. And Sarah, there you are.
On cue.
On cue.
Oh, thank you both for that conversation. I was off camera, but I was nodding and participating, though muted. We have about 10 minutes for Q&A, and we do have some questions. So I'm just going to jump right in. If I tap it, it should appear on your screens too. Yes, we have a question from Andrew. In your experience, are certain Enneagram numbers more willing to engage in the efforts of DEI, either systematically or individually?
Actually, it's not that there are more particular Enneagram numbers, types, points. I like to refer to it as Enneagram points that are willing to engage. It really depends upon the level of health of any of the points on the Enneagram. People who are doing their work, who actually want to do whatever they can to promote unity and connection and to eliminate bias and bigotry. I've seen everything from 1 to 9 show up with their sleeves rolled up. So it is the level of depth that people are willing to go to touch their own souls that really reveals who will show up and do the work.
That makes sense. Okay. Okay, this is a good one. I see that you're this year's IEA Global Conference keynote speaker. How does it feel to be the first Black woman to hold this space, especially on today, International Women's Day?
Oh my God, it feels amazing. Thank you for that question, whoever asked it. You know, you can do this work without line of sight to the progress. You know, I think that when we think about Martin Luther King Jr., he had a dream, but he certainly did not live to see some of the things. He did not live to see Barack Obama become president. You know, he did not live to see many of the milestones that we have reached. It was the IEA that sort of triggered my sort of movement from Enneagram practitioner to Enneagram activist. And so to be acknowledged in that way, it says to me that the community is opening the doors. And I believe that that is just nothing but God's grace allowing me to walk through those doors that are beginning to open. So yes, it feels amazing.
That's great. Got some comments coming up and questions, so I'm just alternating between the two.
Well, alternating, you know, I just want to talk about the narrative Enneagram. I mentioned in 2023, you know, we're going to be doing some very proactive work. And through your voices being heard, we will be putting together a BIPOC cohort group in which you can do your work collectively together. You know, this has been something that has been called to our attention over and over again. And I promise you, we are working hard as a team to bring this together and supporting all of the teachers like Dr. Egerton and Chi-Chi, I think you know, is also a part of our team. You have Jessica out there, Jessica Dixon, you have Milton, you have
Mickey Scott,
you have Tracy,
right?
You know, there's a ton of people right now who are bringing this out. So I'm sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
No, that's great and important to highlight. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to see what we can fit in here. This is just a quick question. I think it says, do you find that the childhood messages apply to the BIPOC community as well?
Yes.
Yes, and you know, there's a line from Bell Hooks that says, all othering usually begins in family.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that I share with people all the time, as they begin this journey, and Erlina, of course, you went through this work with me, we begin looking at our home environment, our family of origin, who was othering who,
Right.
who was our family of origin othering, and where did this all begin? And that's why to do any of this work, you have to be willing to take the deep dive yourself. And I always say, you will be as successful in this work as you are willing to go to whatever level of depth to touch your own soul. And that's the way that we know that we evolved in this work.
Beautiful. Well, and the childhood message coming up kind of is a bridge to a question that I had, or at least a something to point out, because I love the creativity and the intentionality of the language that you kind of set up as the framework for the book. And you touched on this earlier in kind of defining love warriors as a placement or in place of marginalized or minority communities. But you do that with a number of other terms, which I assume, or I guess I would ask, is that to kind of reduce the possible reactivity that people may have to those? Because I think you do a really great job of setting up intersectionality. We have the love warriors, and we have the automatic advantage, and we have the positional power.
Right.
And that's also clearly stated. And I think that's a really creative, intentional use of language that we need sometimes to get around the defenses. And that the childhood message just brought that up for me, because it's like, we need to hear these corrective, like, I'm married to a 5 who needs to hear, that your needs are not a problem, but I can't walk up to him and say, hey, your needs are not a problem. I have to show him that is true in our home. And so anyway, that's a rambling way to say, I appreciate the intentionality of the language. And I don't know if you want to speak to how you arrived at those terms.
Well, I arrived at I call it unpacking. All right. So, and as I'm teaching other facilitators that will go into this work, and sometimes people who are activists are really, really harsh because there's an anger there, and it's a righteous anger. However, when anger is not channeled in a way where it's useful, the anger, I say, wakes you up, and that's a good thing. But then what you do after that matters. So I could just stir around the terminology of white supremacist and white privilege and start from that place and shut down the majority of people that I might like to reach. So I unpack terminology, because when it comes to white privilege, I know white-bodied people here, you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth and you never worked a day in your life. But when I say automatic advantage, what people can hear is, I was born with white skin. Therefore, that gave me some advantages in navigating through the world that people of color didn't get. Just like Bill Gates' children have more advantages than my children because he can buy them the world, So it's just getting people to understand the terminology. And so much of the terminology that is out there right now is already tainted. It already has too much baggage attached to it. So if it has baggage attached to it, people's defenses go up and they're not going to learn anything. So we can be right, or we can take the time to unpack and to work with people if we really want to make a difference. And I really want to make a difference. So I'm willing to do the unpacking to help you.
Yeah, and if I can just add, in every class, every conversation, you always say the same thing, which is universal. This is about love work.
Absolutely.
This is about knowing what love is and using love as a sacrifice to be able to bring healing to people. So that's your mantra. I hear it from you constantly in every chance that you have.
Yeah.
So
and I remember in the cohort you were in, we had some particularly difficult moments where we all had to sit together and together and feel the love and connection to each other in order to survive the pain of those moments. And one of the things I tell people, you may have to shoot an arrow at some point in time,
Yeah.
but make sure you put some love on the tip.
And what this all means, Dr. Egerton, is that you and I have to have another conversation.
Okay.
Because there definitely are people who have much to add to this, and we can go not only deeper with the book, but certainly deeper in exposing what your work is all about. And I just really, again, want to thank you from the narrative Enneagram that you really provided this time for us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and kudos to the narrative Enneagram for the work that, you know, we started, and I started working with you and you're still at it. And the authenticity and sincerity of the effort touches my heart. So thank you, all of you.
Okay.
Beautiful. And we did not quite get to all the questions, so you will have to come back. We will have to have a part 2.
No problem.
As promised, we just need to let people know how to win a free copy of the book real quick before we go. So it's really simple. If you can just like this video post once we're off the call, make sure you're following at Narrative Enneagram and at Enneagram Jedi, and then tag a friend in the comments. We talked about kind of being public and sharing the importance of this conversation. So just tag a friend that you want to hear this this conversation in the comments. You can tag more than one friend, but just do it in a separate comment, and that'll give you more chances to win the book. And I will announce that winner on Monday and mail the book next week. So
Sarah, are you in California? You're not in California, are you?
I'm in Louisiana.
Louisiana. I will sweeten the pot a little bit and I'll sign the book.
Ooh, okay.
So when you announce the winner, let's find out where they're located. If they're coming to the conference, they can bring it to the conference and I'll sign it there. Or if they're not, you can send the book to me. I'll sign it and ship it out.
Beautiful. Thank you. That's so generous and gives folks even more incentive to get in on the giveaway. And I'll reiterate all of that in the caption for this, so folks know how to participate. Okay. No justice, no peace. Make sure you get your copy and read it. And I think an apt way to close, there's a benediction that's beautiful and at the end of the book, and perhaps that can bookend the conversation before we go. So Dr. Egerton says, we can walk this earth as ambassadors of intentional peace. There is no peace without justice. There is no peace where there is division. There is no peace without intentional effort toward peace, brought forward by love. To know justice and to know peace is to first know love. God willing, we will learn to walk side by side as allies, advocates, and love warriors. We will find our way home together.
Amen. And thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, both of you.
Okay.
It was lovely being here.
You'll have a good day.
Okay.
Thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.